Turn on my video, open my video camera so people can see me. Hey, there's my other one. Hey, Christopher, how you doing?
Good, you?
I'm doing pretty good, running around a little crazy. You know, getting back from off the road, I was behind and I got way ahead before I went on the road. But I was on the road so long, I was now behind and I've been playing catch up, and it's been, let's just say it's been interesting. And where is the website? The web page should be up, unless I set the wrong time on it, which I possibly did because I wasn't all there that morning. Ah, you missed the schedule because of the stupid doohickey. There's a frism misses. No. Published. And that should pop up there. Actually, let me put you up here, over here. No, that's not what I wanted. You know, some days Three minutes. There we go. Live Q&A. You bring the questions, I'll bring my answers. Right, and that should start in just a couple minutes. Perfect. Okie dokie.
Got a two-part question tonight.
Ooh. All I know is my standard answer tonight may just be 42.
Hey, if there's an answer, I'll take it.
But you know what that comes from?
Yeah. What's the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
Yep. It's it's the answer to life, the universe, and everything.
Yeah.
My wife likes to say, I have a question for you. She goes, I have a question. I have an answer. Hey, you know. My daughter also has a t-shirt. If you met my parents, you'd understand. All right.
Oh, no, never mind. That's kind of unrelated to the Q&A.
Now, it says that no one's joined on YouTube yet. Hopefully, we'll get some people joining in. I keep waiting for Elon to deliver Starlink in my area to see if I can get some better internet access.
From what I've heard, it's pretty good. The best I've seen is just watching the satellites go overhead. I have a little app that shows me when everything's crossing over. I'm like, oh, look at the dot.
Yeah. It's an interesting concept because it's low Earth orbit, there's a lot less latency issue. Mm-hmm. But were they able? My question is, well, my first question is, okay, how good is it in the satellite to satellite linking to get to a downlink station? But the other part being, because I'm a geek, I want to see what the end unit looks like and make sure I can plug in my security device, because I ain't putting any of my devices directly on the internet. Ain't happening.
I would tell you that my daughter has it out in rural Minnesota, and they're getting download speeds somewhere around 250.
Really, I'm more interested in upload speed, but I've heard some really good numbers from them. So,
Yeah,
well, let's
you
see.
said 50 to 80.
Oh, I would die for that. I get 10 down and 1 up
Oh,
usually.
Oh,
So yeah, I would die. I did an interview for a documentary, and it took me an entire day to upload the video file. So, all right, hey, it is 7 o'clock. Actually, it's 7:01. So, you have been chatting. Welcome, aren't my everyday Americans? You've joined the Constitution Study Live Q&A. I'm glad you joined. Those of you who joined here in Zoom, great. If you want to find out how you can join through the Zoom room and actually talk either face to face or face to avatar, just head to the website constitutionstudy.com. You will see the live Q&A in the event list under the calendar on the right hand side. Register for any of them. You'll join the list to be notified on how to get onto the Zoom room. I'm still waiting to see people on Periscope or on YouTube yet. But if I do, if you want to ask a question, just put it in the comments. I will find it and I will answer it, or at least I'll try real hard. And for those of you who may be joining through the Constitution Study website, I'm keeping an eye on that as well. So if you put a comment in there, I will, again, answer that with the video online. And let's start out with, I know a couple people do have some questions, but I like kicking things off with kind of my thought of the day. And my thought of the day is something I was talking about. I spent the last couple weeks on the road. I did the last event we did from Grand Forks, North Dakota. It was a little confusing because I had so many sources, but we had a great time answering questions up there. And on this trip, I came up with this interesting idea, and I'll kind of want you to chew on it and see what you think. See, in the Revolutionary days, we had people called Minutemen, men that were ready at a moment's notice to run.
Rip.
uh-oh, I think we lost Paul.
Yeah. I guess that upload speed doesn't help. Oh, I guess we'll have to wait.
I think even if he comes back, we might have to sign in over again.
Oh no, there he is.
Awesome.
You're muted, Paul. Still muted.
Now that works better. Let me see. I got to see if I'm still. No, it still says I'm live streaming. So we'll see. Okay. Where was I? Oh, the teachings about the Constitution. That's what I'll try and do, Canoa. But here's what I want you to think about. In the revolutionary times, we had Minutemen, men that were ready at a moment's notice to rush to the defense of friends, neighbors, family, to defend their towns, their villages, their farms. And I think we need today a new set of Minutemen and Minutewomen, not to fight with guns, but to rush to the defense of people who are standing up for their rights. I'm seeing a lot of people complaining about their rights being violated. I'm seeing a small percentage of people that are starting to stand up for their rights. Whether it's, I saw New York, I was just recording an episode, New York City restaurateurs that are really getting fed up being told to enforce a vaccine mandate. There's 1,200 first responders in Hawaii that have sued because of the vaccine mandate. We need men and women that are prepared to come to their aid. because these men and women are going to the legal system. I don't have a problem with them going to the legal system, but I know it is highly unlikely their lawyer knows squat about the Constitution. They don't study it in law school. They don't study it on their own. And most of the lawyers I talk to, when I ask them a constitutional question, give me an answer that is they read it out of some judge, this court said, and this opinion said. How about what the Constitution said? So I want people to think about that. What do you think about the idea of just an informal encouragement to become a man or a woman that is prepared to go help those that are standing for their rights by providing them constitutional information, constitute evidence that the Constitution is their right to say no, and giving them and their legal team the ammo they're missing. So that's kind of my thought of the day. Jan said Montana banned vaccination as a condition of employment and deemed it as discrimination and a violation of the state's human rights law. Do you believe it will stand? Well, you know what? I don't know, Jan, because I don't know the judges in Montana. By the way, some beautiful country out there. I got to drive through. I drove from North Dakota across to Billings and then down. Absolutely gorgeous. The problem I have is you're dealing with judges who are educated in law school. I don't know if they know any better. So if we're putting our hope that courts will save us, we're doomed. I don't think there are enough courts that know the Constitution well enough. Even the Supreme Court doesn't know what the Constitution says. I'm reading opinions from them and I'm like, are these people idiots? So let's not trust in government to protect our rights. They should, but if they fail to protect our rights, let's not trust them to do it. Let's figure out how we can protect our own rights, even when government fails to do so. Does that sound good? All right, with that, let's let the good questions roll. Andy, you started out, you said you had a two-part question you wanted to start with.
Sure. So we've often discussed about USC 18242, deprivation of rights on the cover of law. I was trying to go into that understanding. I don't know what the right word here would be, but what function or legality and purpose the United States Code has in regards to enforcement, I guess, is that the right word?
Well, U.S. Code, it's U.S. law.
Okay.
Right? So the U.S. law is written in the U.S. Code. When Congress passes a law, it ends up, they pass the bill, it gets signed, both houses pass, signed by the president, it gets entered into U.S. Code as a particular title and section. And there's usually actually chapters and subchapters and parts and ad nauseum. But U.S. Code, it's U.S. law. And what's important, again, is Article 6, Clause 2, the Constitution and laws of the United States made pursuant thereto are the supreme law of the land. So it's that's the laws of the United States pursuant thereto. The laws of the United States, not always made pursuant thereto.
Okay, so that brings me to part two of that question, which I was on. If you don't mind, let me just bring this up on my desktop just so I am saying this properly. If I go to United States Code website, sorry, where is it? I'm trying to get to the home page. Apologize. I tried to go to understanding the code. Then you go to about code and website. The very bottom it says additional information. United States Code, what it is, what it isn't, and what it could be. Click on that, nothing there. I went further. I went further on that because I was in Boy Scouts. My senior project, my Eagle Scout project I wanted to be was to raise a flag for the community. So I started looking into the United States Flag Code. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, that made me think further where I just had it up. Apologize for taking so long with this. Okay, I guess I closed that up. But anyway, there's a code for the national anthem, I guess. So if someone doesn't recite the national, or I'm sorry, the Pledge of Allegiance,
Okay.
is that a violation of the law? Like if someone's, I remember it was maybe a couple months ago, someone omitted "One Nation Under God."
Mhm.
Is that against the law?
Well, the law identifies what the national anthem is. I know of no law, doesn't mean it's not there, but I know of no law that requires the recitation or that it be recited properly, because that would be a violation of freedom of speech. Therefore, any law that would require it to be recited or to be recited a certain way is a violation of, it would not be the supreme law of the land because it was not made pursuant to the Constitution. It's one of the reasons when I was younger, the big question was flag burning, which I always found interesting when I realized that the people who are upset about flag burning forget that the only proper way to dispose of a flag is to burn it. Right? According to the U.S. Flag Code, the proper way to dispose of a flag is to burn it with, I think it's burn it with honor or something like that. But it's the same thing. You can't make a law. If you make a law that is repugnant to the Constitution, that is contrary to the Constitution, that violates the Constitution, that law is void. So the law that says the national anthem is a Star-Spangled Banner, usually I think, do they even mention that it's only like the first verse? Because the Star-Spangled Banner actually has 4 verses. And if you've ever heard the other 3 verses, they're very, very interesting. I suggest you look up, you find someone who sings all 4 verses of the Star-Spangled Banner. It's the way Congress said, yep, this is going to be our national anthem. Here you go. But as soon as they say you must recite that, or you must, or not the national anthem, you were saying Pledge of Allegiance. This is our Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Fine. Once you say you must, or you must do it a certain way, then sorry, that's a violation of freedom of speech, violation of the First Amendment. It is therefore void. And we need to get to the attitude. This is the part that is scary to most people, but I think is important to our future, is recognizing that the Constitution is our authority to say no to government. And we need to start being willing to say no, because government is just consuming our rights and our powers and our liberties under the auspices of taking care of us. Not a good situation. Okay, who's next? Careful, or start telling stories about my trip, and I'll have to share pictures, and I have to do the whole geeky tourist thing. By the way, Jan, I did have a wonderful time that morning. Jan was ever so kind to invite me out to her house Sunday morning. We had a nice little church service. It was very nice. A great way to start a great way to start a Sunday. Even though I had to drive to Tioga that afternoon, it was a wonderful time, and I do appreciate it. What's the line from Cat in the Hat, Tin Roof? I survive on the hospitality of strangers.
Something like that.
Something
But
like
we
that.
Comments from everyone that attended, and a whole lot of people that wish they could have been there. So great
Well,
impact.
You'll have to get me out to North Dakota again. I know Dustin wants me for at least 2 more years, so we'll have to do that.
We are working on it. We have started some classes in our area, and hopefully by the time we get together next, even online here, we should have a much larger group joining us.
Okay. How about the YouTubers? Anybody out there have a question? Type it into the chat. Let me see it. Of course, if you're trying to type in the chat and for some reason I'm not seeing it, that's a whole nother question. But somebody throw me a question. Throw me a bone.
How do you how do you think due process would look for proving someone is or someone needs the vaccine, I guess you could say, because you need to go through due process to prove that.
Okay.
You know? I'm just how do you think that would play out?
Well, understand that, due process is defined as a process, either governmental or judicial, designed to protect the rights of the individual. So the problem with the vaccine is the vaccine is meant to be a preventative, what's called a prophylaxis. It's the purpose of vaccine is either to prevent you from getting the disease or to prevent your body from overreacting to the disease. In other words, so that the symptoms don't kill you. If that's the case, you are not a harm to anyone else. They would first have to show that the vaccine not only is a preventative, but it has some function that prevents you from being a danger to others. Next, they have to have some sort of probable cause that you are a danger to others. Now, I forget the name of the case. There was a case, it was a Supreme Court case. I came out of Boston, and it's often misquoted. It's used to say that state and local governments have the authority to force you to take a vaccine. As I remember it, it was in the mid 1800s, a ship had docked that had had an outbreak of smallpox. And a US citizen who was on the ship before he was allowed to exit the ship and enter the country was required to take a smallpox vaccine. Now, let's think about that from a due process standpoint. If you have a contagious disease, smallpox, he was in a relatively confined space for many days with passengers that showed symptoms and tested positive for smallpox. By that standard, I believe you meet probable cause that he either has smallpox or is a carrier of smallpox. So that to me would be, there's due process, because I've looked at this individual case. I'm not making a blanket statement. I have an individual, and I'm able to prove in court that there's a probable cause that he is a carrier of smallpox, therefore could be dangerous to others. So in that case, the court said, yes, he can either be quarantined or he can be vaccinated. And I think it was, he can either be quarantined for a certain amount of time, or he can be vaccinated and quarantined for a couple of days and then be let out. That is a due process. You were protecting the rights of that individual. You had a probable cause that he was a danger to others. The problem with all the vaccine mandates, each and every one I've read, each and every one I've heard people opine about, it has nothing to do with a probable cause that you are deadly. It is the presupposition that everybody is sick, everybody has the virus, everybody is spreading it, therefore, everybody must take this vaccine. Now, let's stop and forget the fact that of the 330 million Americans, how many have actually tested positive for COVID-19? Let's ignore the fact that the original PCR test apparently couldn't distinguish between COVID and influenza. We'll wash that away. You're still talking, what, 60, 65, 66 million? So roughly, you're talking 20%. That is not everybody. Second, all the tests that I've read have shown that once you get the disease, your natural immunity is not only more effective than the vaccine, it's longer lasting than the vaccine. So if you've already had COVID-19, you are not a probable cause because you're not shedding the virus to spread it to others. Let's then add the fact that all the studies show that young children, especially under 5, not only do not tend to contract COVID-19, they tend not to spread it. As of a few months ago, one doctor I was talking to There is not a study yet that has found a COVID infection that was sourced to a child under 5. In other words, a child under 5 spread it to somebody else. So I already know that probably half to as much as 2/3 of the country does not have the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Therefore, the probability that I have it is actually fairly low. I know that if 65 million, I know at least 20% of the country that probably has a natural, that are not has a natural based immunity because they've already had the disease. And I know that young children are not spreaders of the disease, so there's no probable cause that they're going to spread to somebody else. So what is your probable cause that me as an individual, or you or anyone else, are a contagious person, therefore I need to be vaccinated? And if they tell you it's to keep you safe, that's not your job. Your job is to protect my rights. Due process requires that you protect my rights, not my health. I got one from Kanoa. Hello, Kanoa. Article 2, Section 4 of the Arizona Constitution. What is the due process of law referring to? Well, we were talking a little about that, Kanoa. Due process are 2 words. Due meaning what you are owed. Process is some procedure you follow. Now, there's online, you can find the free legal dictionary. And if you look up due process in the free legal dictionary, it states it's a judicial or governmental process designed to protect the rights of the individual. So any place you see US Constitution, state constitutions, it means that there must be a judicial or governmental process that protects your rights as an individual. Not the rights of the community, not the rights of society, not the rights of the nation. The rights, your right as an individual. That's why they must show probable cause that you personally are a danger. And if they try to throw, well, it's such a pandemic, I'm sorry, the numbers just don't add up. When, what was the last number I looked at? I was just looking at numbers the other day up on the CDC website. Let me bring it over here so I'm not looking off to the side. I love the fact that the CDC has kind of hidden their, well, it's not really hidden. They used to have it right on the front page where you could find it real quick. And they make you kind of scan down and click through a couple things. You can finally get to their cases and data, and they like to do some limitations and stuff. So if I look at the COVID data tracker, no, not the weekly review. Where's the actual data tracker? See, they've rearranged things again. Cases, deaths, and testing. Okay. So, oh, there we go. My numbers were wrong. There have been less than 40 million cases so far. Total cases, 38,341,339. So a little over 10% of the country has tested positive for COVID, even considering the questionable original PCR test. And let's see, right now, it's just under, in the last 7 days, there have been 300 cases nationwide per 100,000 tests. So that's roughly what, 0.3%. Total deaths, 631,440. So if I bring up my little calculator and I do a little math and I take my 631,440 deaths divided by 38,341 cases, 340,339 cases, that is 1.65% of the overall cases, total deaths, 1.6%. Does that sound like an emergency? Now, COVID-19 is an emergency. I just contend it's not a medical emergency as much as it is a political emergency. But does that answer your question, Kanoa? I hope it does. Does somebody else have one for me?
I suppose I have another one.
Let her rip.
Just, I'm not really sure it's that big a deal, but the Senate, Section 3, Article 1, the seats of the senators of the first class shall be vacated. Basically, it's split into 3 classes,
Correct.
and it is a rotation of like thirds. I just didn't understand why.
So the very first election in 1788, we had no senator, 0, goose egg, right? So they had to elect 26 senators, 2 from each state. Well, they wanted the Senate to rotate in thirds, right? So the idea is rather than having them all elected every 6 years, they wanted a third of them elected every 2 years with whatever house, with the biannual House election. So what they did is said the very first set of senators elected would be broken into 3 classes. One would have their term expire in 2 years, one would have them term expire in 4 years, and then the rest at 6 years. That way there would, after that initial election, you would always be electing 1/3 of the Senate with the entire House. And that gets changed every once in a while because you have when new states are added, the numbers change a little bit. That generally, I believe, is handled with the enacting clause as to when the senator, their first senator's terms will expire, so that they maintain that roughly 1/3 of the Senate gets reelected, is up for election every year. Yeah, simple enough.
Yeah, I liked it. Thank you.
All right, what's next? Come on, throw some good ones at me. The rule is you bring the questions, I bring the answers. If I got to talk all this time, I threaten to bring out pictures. Come on, Christopher, Lord, Jam, when do you got to have a question? I got Kano again. Okay. Article 2, Section 27 of the Arizona Constitution. Does National Guard fall under standing Army? They're a full-time employed National Guardsman. Well, first of all, the National Guard is not under the control of the federal government full-time. In other words, they are only under the control, they're only federalized when Congress calls them up, not when the president calls up, when Congress calls them up. Now, we get into something interesting when, oh, by the way, it's not when the Speaker of the House calls them up either. So all those National Guardsmen in Washington, D.C. that have been there since January 6th, because some House Democrats got their panties in a wad because people actually were not happy with the way the election went forth. Right? So the National Guard is considered part of what's called the organized militia. Under federal law, there are 2 types of militia. There's the organized and the unorganized militia. All the National Guard, all the reserves, they're considered organized militia because, one, in the case of the reserves, they are former active duty military. So they are considered they've been through the process. They've been in the military. The Guard are expected to serve their state every so many times, so many weekends a year, so many weeks a year, to remain prepared and ready. And that's actually an important part of the original structure because let me double check the actual article. So let's see. Yeah, Article 1, Section 8. Congress has the authority to provide for organizing, arming, disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to their states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. So That's probably why Arizona, and again, I don't know the Arizona Constitution by heart. That's probably why they have certain, probably officers full-time in the Guard. They're meant to be. Picture this, right? Let's understand. We're starting with an agricultural community, an 18th century community. If an invasion happens, let's say Canada invades, right? And all you got is a bunch of trigger-happy farmers with their guns that someone's got to organize this mess to turn it into something useful. That is why, although the Congress has the power to set training standards, provide for the organizing and arming and disciplining the militia, to keep them organized, to keep them armed, to keep them disciplined. Right? The Congress is expected to pay for that. They can set the standards for discipline, but it's still the states that have to do the actual organizing, disciplining, which is why the states retain control of the appointment of officers. So the idea being is a bunch of, like I said, trigger happy farm boys. Trust me, I love me some trigger happy farm boys. But a bunch of trigger-happy farm boys shows up to repel an invading Canada. You want some officers that have been trained and disciplined to organize this mess into some sort of fighting force, which is why under federal law, the Guards and the reserves are all considered the organized militia. They're prepared, they're trained. The unorganized militia is everyone 18 to 45 who is armed. And if you, every male 18 to 45 that's been armed, every female, if you've served in the military or the reserves, if you served in the military or the Guard, and a male, if you served in the military, you actually consider part of the unorganized militia until you turn 65. That's the way the federal law lays it out. But here's the general idea, right? If Canada invades, and a bunch of us volunteers from Tennessee, we hoof it north to go defend the border, you're not going to let us loose. You want some organized militia to help keep us, to help make us effective, right? And that's probably why, in the case of Arizona, now is that considered a full-time, a standing army? You could consider that a standing army. The question is, does the state of Arizona prohibit a standing army? Because the Arizona National Guard belongs to Arizona, not to the United States, until Congress calls them up. So that would be and I honestly don't know if any state has a thing about standing armies. Now, we have a standing army. Now, I'm going to pop a couple ideas here. Technically, every 2 years, the Army gets refunded, right? The National Defense Authorization Act, because the Constitution prohibits an Army from being funded for more than 2 years. The idea is if, one of the generals goes crazy and decides to, simply take over, well, the idea is his money is going to run out, or her money is going to run out. That's the way it's set up. The effect, it made a lot more sense in the 1800s and the early 1900s. It's a lot harder to do when you realize how long it takes to train not only even a modern military rifleman, a Marine rifleman takes so much training compared to the 1800s. I mean, 1800s, you put the gunpowder in, you put the wad in, you put the ball in, you pack it all down, you pour a little gunpowder in, you point, you shoot. Practice that a few times, you're ready to go. Right now, they got to deal with comms, you got to deal with much more advanced weaponry, you've got to deal with satellites, and there's a lot more involved. It takes a lot more training. Now think about what it takes for, say, a fighter pilot or a transport pilot or someone to drive a tank. It's a lot harder to keep that idea of you're only going to be around here for a little while, then you're going to go home, and then you're going to come back for a little while. So that's why we have this. We have an ongoing military And kind of the wink, wink, nod, nod to the Constitution is, well, you're only funded for every 2 years. So if the Congress can't get its act together and pass the NDAA, technically the military doesn't get paid anymore. And nobody wants that, which is why Congress likes to throw a lot of pork in the NDAA, because they know it's must pass. It has to get passed. So any piece of garbage that they can't get past any other way, they're going to try and shove into the NDAA so that they can get, because they know that has to pass, which is why the NDA is so bloated and full of pork and garbage and nonsense. But then again, our employees, the ones we hire to exercise our authority, allow this to happen, and we don't fire them. So whose fault is it ultimately? But the other part I'm thinking about is if we're talking about a standing army, think about how militarized both state and federal law enforcement have become. I mean, as I understand it, the USDA has a law enforcement arm. Why in God's name does the Agriculture Department need an armed law enforcement? What's the worst you're going to do? Find some guy? Take him to court? You don't expect a USDA inspector to go taking down a serial killer. But so we've actually are turning our law enforcement into that standing army that our framers were so afraid of, because they saw what happened. And guess what? When you start looking at law enforcement, I love this. I just saw this article the other day. The officer that shot Ashley Babbitt, the one that the Capitol Police refused to identify, they did a little internal investigation. Nope, everything's fine. He did nothing wrong. Bullcrap. I'm sorry. I don't trust you. You wouldn't trust, if the Capitol Police came to my house and said, Mr. Engel, we think you have contraband. No. I've searched my house thoroughly, top to bottom. There is no contraband. Trust me. They ain't doing it. That family has a legal right to the name of the officer that shot their daughter. They have a right to charge him with a crime if they have evidence that he did so, that the shooting was not lawful. They have the right to have their day in court, and they're being denied that right by a Capitol Police that's covering their own butt. The very fact that they refuse to let this person's name out brings a lot of suspicion. No proof, but a lot of suspicion. But that is exactly the nonsense the British standing army in the colonies used to do way back in the 1760s and 70s. Oh, you shot the neighbor boy? Well, we did an internal investigation. No, he didn't shoot him. Everything was fine. Walk away. Nothing to see here. Okay. Jan likes typing them, I guess. I like verbalizing the questions, like having a conversation. So, okay, here's one I had thrown at me. Can a sitting president be held legally accountable for executive decisions like the debacle in Afghanistan? I wouldn't think a military decision made by a president could be an impeachable offense. Okay. So the Constitution says a president can be impeached for bribery, treason, high crimes, and misdemeanors. Now, bribery is basically how the government at both the state and federal level work. Everything's bribery. I could make a case. I could literally make a case of bribery against pretty much every politician I have ever seen on TV, because each and every one of them is promising someone something in exchange for their vote. But that means we're also the ones accepting the bribes. We complain about lobbyists spending money to buy influence. Yet we sit there and we watch all the campaign ads and we say, we're going to vote for this yo-yo because, well, he's either going to cut my taxes, or he's going to tax the other guy, or he's going to support this program or that program, or he was for the infrastructure bill or not for the infrastructure bill. It's all bribery. So, could a military decision be an impeachable offense? Well, it's not bribery. Is it in order for it to be treason, there would have to be evidence that President Biden was colluding with the Taliban to subvert the government of the United States. And that just isn't the case. Technically, the Taliban is our enemy, but there hasn't been a formal declaration of war. So the federal government doesn't recognize them as an enemy of the United States. So simply giving aid and comfort to the enemy, to the Taliban, is not technically treason. The way, for example, if Roosevelt had given aid and comfort to the Japanese, that would have been treason. He could have been impeached. Giving aid and comfort to the Taliban, not really treason. So no, he can't be impeached. But can he be held legally accountable? There's this fiction that a president cannot be arrested while in office. There is nothing in the Constitution that says anything like that. The closest you get, let's see. I gotta find it. It's in Article 1 somewhere. No, actually, I think it's up here. Okay, Article 1, Section 6. The senators and representatives shall receive a compensation for their services as to be ascertained by law and paid out of the Treasury of the United States. They shall in all cases except treason, felony, and breach of the peace be privileged from arrest during their attendance at the session of the respective houses and going to and returning from the same, and for any speech or debate in either house, they shall not be questioned in any other place. So first of all, that only deals with Congress. The president is not listed, so he doesn't fall into this protection. What they're saying is, okay, while they're in attendance at their respective house, going to or coming from, they shall be privileged from arrest except treason, felony, and breach of the peace. So you have treason again, right? That's not it. But should Nancy Pelosi have an arrest warrant put out for her for a felony, right? She can't be arrested while in the house. Well, she could be arrested because it's a felony. Let's say it's a misdemeanor, right? She gets too many parking tickets. I don't know. She violated the COVID mask mandate, and there's evidence. They decide to prosecute her. Fine. There's an arrest warrant out for her. They can't arrest her while she's on the Capitol doing business, going to it, or returning from it. So basically, you could extend that to basically while she's in Washington. As soon as she goes home, she can be arrested. Now, if it's a felony, she could actually be arrested in her chambers. She could be arrested on the floor of the House if it's a felony warrant, or if it's breach of the peace, which is basically a rabble-rouser. In other words, if she had participated in the Antifa and BLM rallies in Washington, D.C., and there was evidence and an arrest warrant was issued for her, she could be arrested on the floor of the House right in front of the C-SPAN cameras. I'd love to see that happen. But of course, but notice, this is the House, right, and the Senate. This is not the president. There is nothing in articles that privileges the president from arrest, except the closest you get is the only punishment for impeachment is removal from office, disqualification from ever holding an office of trust in the United States ever again. However, it specifically states there can be a criminal trial after that. But there's nothing that says the president cannot be arrested if he's found to commit, hey, he's found to commit treason, and for whatever reason, he's not yet being impeached. He can be arrested if he's got a criminal case. If the president went out and, I don't know, on camera beat one of the reporters with a golf ball, with a golf a club, he could be arrested. Here's the other interesting thing. Who would arrest the president? Legally, your county sheriff can arrest the president for crimes committed within the county. Now, I want to see them go up against the Secret Service to do this, but legally, according to the Constitution, the president is not above the law. The Supreme Court is not above the law. Congress gets some protection. And again, remember why this was most likely put in place was because we still had a lot of internal dissension among the states. You think about today when you have, maybe a disagreement between New York and New Jersey, or between Maryland and Virginia. And just imagine the senator or a representative from one of those states is transiting through to go to their business. You don't want the local yokels harassing them with an arrest warrant, either while they're in office or while they're going to and from. So in order to do that, you got to have a pretty serious charge. But there is no such protection for the president. I know the court says there is. I have yet to see anybody point to a clause in the Constitution that protects the president from arrest for crimes committed while in office, or protects him from arrest while in office for any crime he may be charged with. How is it I'm assuming, Sean, how is it constitutional to put so many non-related things? Because nothing in the Constitution says what can and cannot be in a bill. The Constitution doesn't say what can and cannot be in a bill. But remember, these yahoos work for us. We've got to get to the point of, you're our employee. If you're padding bills, that is fraud in my mind. You're not qualified. If you're voting for these omnibus bills, right, that's fraud. You're disqualified. I don't care what party you're in. I don't care how many goodies you promise to send me. I don't care how much you plan to cut my taxes, pay for childcare, pay for health care. I don't care. That's the problem with bribery. See, once you get dependent on the goodies from those in Washington, you start overlooking the means because the ends are good. This ends justify the means is destructive. It's corrosive because, I know it's wrong, but the ends are good. I know it's wrong to throw all this garbage into the NDAA, but we've got to have the NDAA, so I got to vote for it. I'm sorry, no. The fact that you're letting the ends corrupt your means that you've become corrupted. And if you're corrupted, I can't trust you. If I can't trust you, you can't work for me. And that has to become the bottom line. Okay, who else? Come on, everyone's
Just kind
quiet.
of have a side thought. Kind of going back to what you were talking about before with the Minutemen thought was if I maybe just say some feedback on it, but honestly, that's kind of what I think the whole Constitution studying scholars program is. I kind of feel like that's what we are, and if we can do that locally, I think that would be, I guess the main goal, and I do this at work too. People discuss, because the mass stuff comes up all the time, and I tell them the same thing. local sheriff. I tried to contact my sheriff, but he's very busy, so I'm going to do an email. I'm saying like, I'm saying the same things that I hear in the podcast. Let's talk to the sheriff, tell each other our rights, and start thinking about this stuff so that we can each locally focus on that.
Yeah, you know, it's to me, the Constitution Study is the training program for the Minutemen. It's boot camp, if you want to put it that way, right? It's the musket drills. It's getting together, preparing. It becomes, you know, it's like anything else. It becomes a habit with practice. You know, on the tour, I got asked a bunch of questions, and I get asked, you know, well, how do I do this? And I said, well, part of it is I spent the last 3 years, most of my day talking about constitutional issues. Now, that can be considered a good thing or a bad thing, but it's that continuous exposure that makes it, it's the, you've heard of a term called muscle memory. You know, when I do a lot of training, talk about muscle memory. If you do a certain action over and over and over again, it creates a pathway in the brain, and your mind no longer has to think about the action; it simply does it. That can be a good thing or a bad thing, right? You can embed a lot of bad habits that way. Well, in the same way, the habit of looking and thinking constitutionally becomes a habit. And the other thing I notice is my wife used to work at a bank. And when she worked at the bank, when she was trained to spot counterfeit bills. You know how she was trained to spot counterfeit bills? She was never handed a counterfeit bill. She was only handed real legitimate currency, to the point where the feel and the smell, everything became so familiar that when she touched a counterfeit bill, even if she didn't recognize what was wrong, she knew something was wrong. So that's why, you know, when we talk about reading, and again, reading is important, you know, reading the Constitution, becoming familiar with it, but it's that studying, it's the reason why I love questions. It's answering those questions that begin to establish those pathways that say, oh, okay, what was it? Kanoa was asking, what is due process of law? Okay, Kanoa, I'd love for you to do things and think about, well, due process of law. In other words, now you have a definition. Can you take some time during the day when something comes up and consider, well, is that due process or not? And can you come up with an argument? By doing that, and I'm only picking on Kanoa because you specifically asked about due process. It's the same for all these concepts. It's the regular exposure, the exercising your mind to think about things like due process. It's one of the reasons why court rulings, whenever someone says court rulings, it drives me nuts, because I have spent so much time. It started with somebody I was listening to who pointed out to me that courts don't rule, they opine. And I kept, and you know, it's like, you're right. And so every time I heard a court ruling, I made a conscious thought that said, hey, no, courts don't rule, they opine. And after a while, I didn't have to think about it. It became automatic. And I think that's the process of the study, is to get it so that we're picking these things that are important to us, and they become so familiar that when they're violated, our mind automatically picks it out, isolates it, shows us, and said, see, that was wrong. I was interviewed for a documentary, hopefully it'll come out early next year. And it was funny because they had several questions they were going to ask me. And they said, we'd like to set up an interview with the director, I think it was, or the producer, I forget which. And we have these questions. These are the questions that if you get interviewed that we're going to ask, you know. Okay, so I jump on with him, and he goes, so did you look at he asked me some other questions, and I said, yeah, we are all set. And he goes, well, did you look at the questions? I said, yeah. And I don't think you're going to like my answers because the first three questions had to deal with a democracy. I said, because America's not a democracy. He goes, well, I thought, I said, no, we're a constitutional republic. Well, I thought that was a form of democracy. No. And I had to explain what a democracy was and what a republic is and how a constitutional republic kind of places extra restrictions on a republic. Well, he sent me a new set of questions where it was now democracy/republic. So, but it was that every time I see or hear American democracy, my mind latches on it, isolates it. And not only is it pointed out to me, it immediately puts me at guard to say, if the person speaking got that wrong, what else are they going to get wrong? It's kind of that initial flint, you know something's wrong. I found it to be very effective to the point where this becomes natural, to the point where, where I used to have to look stuff up all the time. I may not remember the actual, article, section, and clause, but I know what the Constitution says. And occasionally someone will surprise me with something I hadn't thought of, but that's pretty rare. I'm pretty much, I'm pretty on the ball with that. So, which, Kanoa asked an interesting question. How much time do I spend studying state constitutions versus US Constitution? Most of my dedicated focus is US constitutions. I study state constitutions when I've got an issue in a state that I'm dealing with. So, for example, after the election debacle, I was working with people in, among other places, Pennsylvania. So I went to look and I studied parts of the Pennsylvania Constitution to understand what the election law was, what it said about emergency powers. So I don't dedicate study to the Constitution, of the states, partially because there's so many of them. Many of them have very similar concepts. It's the peripheral stuff tends to change, but the basic concepts are generally the same. But what I actually, someone keyed me into an idea that I'm starting to think about, and that is doing a study on the different state ratification debates. When the Constitution went to the states and they were debating it, maybe spending some time in those more than the constitutions. And again, it's one of those things, I found, at least the way my mind works, when I know something is similar, I can pick it up fairly quickly. Like I said, I spent 30 years in IT. I spent a lot of time as a programmer and shell script and a script writer. And the one thing I found is programming languages have a very similar basic set of concepts. They have different syntax. They have different structures or the way they're constructed. But there's always going to be a looping construct. There's always going to be a branching construct. There's always going to be a decision construct. There's always going to be some sorts of variables. So it's very easy for me to pick up a language because I'm not learning those basics all over again. I'm learning that language's unique way of doing it. Sadly, that doesn't work for me with spoken languages or written languages. It only works with the computer languages, but that's my burden to bear. But for me, state constitutions are kind of the same. I know I'm going to find something that's going to talk about freedom of speech and freedom of religion and freedom of press. And it's going to, there's going to be a Bill of Rights or a Declaration of Rights. And then the rest of it tends to be a lot more in the minutia, and I can go find it by looking for it. So, I don't actually spend a lot of time studying state constitutions, although I am starting to consider studying. In fact, I wanted to take some time tomorrow and start looking at some of the state ratification debates and see what I can learn about both the US Constitution and potentially about the state constitutions of those states, because many of those, I'm curious, did that come up in the debate? So that was that. Okay. Anyone else? Actually, anybody over here on the Constitution study? Not seeing any. I'm not seeing any comments. Anybody else got a question? I'm not seeing any. We've only been an hour and you've already run out of questions. Well, here's what I've been doing. And I've been promoting a little sporadically. I want to try a little better, both on the radio show and on, I have access to retweeters that retweet stuff from the show. So I'm trying to use them to help spread the word about the Q&A, because I think the Q&A is kind of cool and kind of unique. I don't know of a lot of places to get these types of constitutional questions answered, but I'm trying to do that to generate more interest. Whatever you guys can do to help spread the word. I know, Jan, you just joined up, but whatever we can do to help encourage people, because I think, it's one thing to read and be talked to about a concept or a situation. It's a lot different when it's a Q&A, especially if it's more interactive, when I'm answering your questions rather than simply spouting off what happened to be of interest to me this week. In fact, you know what? I've been starting this challenge. I'm going to throw it out to everyone here. Here's my challenge. I'm calling it the John Jay Challenge. John Jay said, every member of the state ought diligently to read and study the Constitution of his country and teach a rising generation to be free. So here's the challenge. I put this out at every, well, no, I didn't do it to everyone. I started putting this out when I was on the tour, and I haven't seen a lot of traction, but I'm hopeful. So my challenge is, within the next 7 days, I want everyone to read the Constitution within the next 7 days. It shouldn't take more than 30 minutes, but it's important, because here's what I want you to do. I want you to read it with a pen and paper next to you, and I want you to create 2 lists. The first list is something you read that you didn't realize before. One of the podcasts I used to listen to had what he calls INTOT moments, INTOT. I never thought of that. So when you're reading through the Constitution, you read something, it's like, hey, I never thought of that. Like maybe it's a question of, can the president be arrested while in office? Or would the National Guard be considered a standing army? Right, that's more of a question, but something you read and it's like, you never thought, write that down in one list. Right? The other is, every time you get a question, right? Hey, can the president be arrested? Is the National Guard standing army? Write them down. And I want you to do that for 2 reasons. One is, I love those INTOT moments, because those are the moments that open up our minds to other ideas. And those are great things to share with others, because it is rare that you're the only one that never thought of it. When people come up to me with ideas that they said, hey, I was reading and I saw this and I never thought of that. I was driving to one of the events up in North Dakota, and I had a guy give me a call, and he's the one that got me interested in the idea of studying the state ratification debates. And he has this idea. I'm not 100% sold on his idea, but this idea of, hey, you know what? The state ratification debates, we talk about the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers about the arguments for and against the Constitution. Well, those arguments were also made in the ratification debates. So I want to read them and better understand them. So those INTOT moments are great. Bring them, and then you can bring them and share them. You've now also got, questions you can ask, because you've taken the time to do this. Now you can add to that list other things that pop into your mind that are constitutional, but do that. Take some time, read through the Constitution. If you've read through it over and over again, it becomes a little pedantic, but take your time and read it. And then when something pops in your mind, write it down, bring it next time. We'll have a bit more of a discussion. I want to try this idea of what I call the John Jay Challenge as a way of encouraging people to be a little more active in participating in their own study, to go from that reading to the studying. aspect. So with that, I've chatted for a while. Anybody got a question for me? If not, I'll be tempted to shut down early.
I don't know if I can ask something pertaining to the website.
Why not? If no one else has a question, I'll take it.
I'm just curious because I've been a constitutional scholar for a while. I just want to know what the next step is to become apprentice level.
So the apprentice, here's my plan for the apprentice. I'm still looking for people that are willing to get engaged. I look at it as a mentorship program. Many years ago, when I was a much younger man, and I was still just studying my Bible, I had a gentleman he was my mentor. He got me started. He gave me a good platform to get started. So I created this program and I gave it 3 levels. And I tried to come up with fancy names, but I wanted something that was a little more descriptive. So I've got apprentice, journeyman, and master. And it follows, that's worked for thousands of years in the economy. It should work here. The idea of an apprentice is you're a scholar, you're a student, right? Scholar doesn't mean expert. A scholar means a student. You become a student of the Constitution. I'm looking for people. I'm developing courseware still, but I'm looking for men and women that want to get engaged. I'm trying to set up regular Zoom meetings where the apprentices can get together. I've had really bad luck at people actually showing up. I've got part of it may be I started it on a different platform and I brought it over to the new platform. But I also know there's the 90-10 rule, right? 90% of the people will not pay any attention to it. 10% will be active, and that's the way it is. So I am looking for people that are interested in being in that. And my plan is have regular Zoom meetings to chit chat, to discuss. These are open meetings. These are there's not an agenda. I might have a couple of ideas, but it's not it can be whatever we want. I want to pair an apprentice with a more senior person, generally a journeyman, to help mentor them along, to work with them more one-on-one. So I've only got one journeyman. He's still up in training, but I want journeymen they're still learning, but now they're teaching others, right? So you think of like an apprentice plumber, an apprentice framer is just figuring out how to carry a hammer. A journeyman, you can send out on a job alone. They can do the job, but they're still learning. They still got stuff to learn. And I want to pair journeymen with apprentices so that when you get stuck, when you have an idea, if you just need some motivation, you've got someone to talk to be involved with. Now, right now, I'm the only one doing the mentoring because it's still pretty small. A master is someone who not only he's still a student, he or she's still a student. They're still learning, but they've learned most of the stuff. They're filling in the gaps. They're teaching others, but masters are the people I want to work with to develop more content. So they're the ones I want to work with on new books, new courses, new videos. They're creating content with me to help expand this and grow. Now, how do you become an apprentice? First of all, you have to sign up at the Constitution Scholars. That is free, right? It doesn't cost you anything. To become an apprentice, basically, you go to the shop and you look under memberships, you'll see apprentice, journeyman, master. It's $5 a month or $50 a year. You get the first month free, and you become an apprentice. And like I said, I'm still looking for people that are a bit more active. My current apprentices are not as active as I would like. I got 1 or 2, but we haven't. Every time I send out a thing and says, "Hey, I want to have an apprentice meeting. Tell me what day of the week works best. Better morning, midday, evening. You tell me." I think out of a dozen apprentices, I got two or three answers, one person showed up. They all gave me the same answer, by the way. So it wasn't a scheduling issue. So, but that's what the apprentices are doing. And my goal is to, because of my weird brain, my mind works different than other people. It's just the way it is. I was quite comfortable studying the Constitution by myself. You know, I would sit down. My wife will tell you, I'd sit down and I'd have a clause. I'd look at the next clause in the Constitution, and I'd read it and I'd research it and I'd study it and I try to put it in my own terms, because that's how I process things. And then I'd write about it. And that was my process. Well, not everybody works with that process. Not everybody's going to sit down and read something and extract all the marrow out of it. So I want this mentoring program to be a place where people can learn what is the best way for them to study the Constitution, and then if they wish to progress, to start teaching the Constitution to others. So.
Okay, I have a question for you. When something is labeled public, does that mean local? Does that mean state, federal? I guess the reason I'm asking is I know that there are some parents where the schools have mask mandates, and the parents are walking their unmasked children into school and staying with them so that the teacher does not mask them, but the school is calling the police and having the parents removed as trespassers.
Ah, very interesting. Hello there, Tyler.
That's an
excellent question, because public is often misunderstood. For something to be public generally means it is publicly owned, publicly funded. So when you're talking about a public school is a school that is public because it is publicly funded. It is therefore owned by the public, and its property should be just as open as a public street or a public sidewalk. Now, there are certain concerns that come up. For example, you don't want the creepy homeless guy wandering the halls of your elementary schools, right? It's public, but he's a nuisance. The problem the schools are going to run into is these are parents with their children, and the parents are expressing a concern that the school is not protecting the children, not because they're making them wear a mask, but because they're going to force them to wear a mask against their will. I was talking with somebody the other day, had a similar situation, but it was an adult, and that adult has what I would describe as a claustrophobia disorder, so that the wearing of a mask produces severe anxiety. And I was trying to give him some advice on how he can deal with this situation, because she's being asked to report to a public venue that had a mask mandate. Okay. The problem I would have is, okay, parent, the first thing you have to understand is the parents show up. If the police try to remove the parents, no, I'm here watching my child, because the school has demonstrated a willingness to infringe on the rights of my child. That is not acceptable. I'm here defending my child. That gives me a legitimate reason to be here. As long as they're not disrupting the class, as long as they're not interrupting and arguing with the teacher, if they are sitting there quietly watching their child at school, they are, that is public property. They have every right to be there. They are not being a nuisance. The next thing is, if you throw me out of school, understand first, I am taking my child and I am going to sue the school district because you are charging me taxes to educate my child, but you're putting a requirement that infringes on their rights. You are violating federal law. I'm going to sue you for the taxes I'm paying, plus the cost I'm going to have to spend to educate my child. And I need the officer's name and badge number so that I can file a complaint with the FBI. But here's my question. If the parent has the time to spend all day in class with the student, why doesn't the parent simply homeschool the child? I know that's scary to a lot of people. And when children are younger, and we homeschooled my daughter through, well, she did it in 11 years. She had everything else. The first few years are the most difficult because that's the time when the child needs the most help. That first few grades, you're there, you're reading with them, you're helping them write, you're going through the classes, you're doing all of this. If you've got the time to sit in a classroom with your child being taught, my guess is you probably can have the time to actually teach your child, because my experience is you can probably, what your child is learning in 6 to 8 hours in school can probably be taught in a couple hours to 4 hours at home. Most of the days, my daughter was done after about 4 or 5 hours.
I don't
So-
disagree with that at all, Paul. In fact, homeschooling is up 50% in our state. However, this was the first day of school,
Mhm.
and they heard that kids were being forced to mask up. So he was going to accompany his child the next day, is what he said. And it went viral. It was on all of the news stations and all of the talk shows. And the police called the parent and said, the school has made known that you are going to violate our rules. And I don't know what rules the school has. It's in in Fargo. And they said that they will be removed for trespassing. And I couldn't see that.
You cannot trespass on property you own. It is
Yeah.
public property. It is publicly owned property. So first, I would tell the officer, how can I trespass on property that I partially own? You're telling, this is public property. I can be removed for being a nuisance. But now you're also talking, because what you're now talking about is prior restraint. You're being punished for something you haven't done yet. All right. So that becomes another scenario. This is where, so as I understand, the parent doesn't intend to do this forever, just for a few days to let the school know they're not putting up with this nonsense, which is a good thing. I got no problem with that. I would tell them, first of all, I cannot be charged with trespass for property I partially own. This is public property. The teacher is a public employee. They work for me and the other parents. They don't have the authority to dictate to me whether or not I can observe my child's instruction. Now you're adding prior restraint. You are telling me beforehand, you're going to punish me for a crime I haven't committed. You're threatening to punish me for a crime I cannot commit before I've even committed it. Do you really want to go find a good lawyer and get that will work on contingency and just ask him to look for the dollar signs? Because that will scare the school district much more than anything else. Sadly, that's the state of affairs. Actually, you know what you should, even better than that. This went viral. How many parents in that school district would be willing in one day to show up and shadow their children?
That's what they're trying to find out. And
They
they have a recall petition for all of the school board members, and they got enough signatures to get it moving. So
I would find if there's a lawyer that's willing to work on contingency, but I would come armed with find the trespass law, and you'll find it deals with private property. Therefore, it probably deals with private property. Therefore, this cannot be trespass. Officer, how stupid are you that you don't realize that? Whatever officer called this person, how stupid are you that you don't know that? Contact the school lawyer. How stupid are you to not know the trespass law? Then have as many people as you can, the Minutemen and women, join that parent, shadow their children. The more, the merrier. make it an event, put it online, let people see it, be respectful, be polite, be quiet, don't be disruptive. Their job from the moment they walk in to the moment they leave, they should act like students, except they're students auditing a class. They sit in the back, they watch, they're quiet, they film their child. Right? As soon as the bell rings and they go to the next class, they can talk, they can be engaged. They should show up and act like students auditing a class. And then, right, all that information, all that, you make that as publicly available as possible. And basically, you're using the Constitution as your authority to say, no, we will not comply with your draconian order that says we have to submit our children to your tyranny without any challenge. We don't work for the school board. The school board works for the parents. And it's about time they remind them of that. Where's this happening?
In Fargo, North Dakota.
If someone there would be interested, put them in contact with me. I'd love to give them some advice. I'd love to put their story on the radio. I'd love to see what happens. Send them my email address, put them in touch with me. And I would love to do a little research on North Dakota trespass law. I'd love to find out that it involves private property and just give that school board, that school lawyer, and that law enforcement officer a real lesson.
Well, so far, I think it's the only city in the state that's requiring it, and that being so backwards in their measures.
Well, I've heard stories about Fargo, but yes, if you know somebody, or if you see somebody's post, DM them or whatever, and yes, send them my way. I'd be more than happy to talk to them, to spread the word. And if I can offer some advice and assistance, I'd love to help, because I think there's a possibility there if they can get more than 2 or 3 parents to actually show up and stand up for their kids.
I think I can make that happen.
Cool.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any other questions? Questions, comments, Cracker Jack? I'm not seeing any. I'm not seeing any on the website. I'm not seeing any on the YouTubes. Did I get it on Periscope? Doesn't look like I got anybody on Periscope. Well, we're getting close to the bottom of the hour, so I guess we'll cut off a little bit. Favorite Disney movie? Oy, I'd have to say the original Aladdin. That Robin Williams was a master in that. That's it. I would say that's probably my favorite Disney movie. Now you have to understand, I'm in my 50s. I grew up Sunday night watching what do they call it? The Disney Sunday Theater or whatever. They do all these Disney stuff. So there's several of the old ones that I probably don't remember that much from my childhood. But the one that pops out right now is would probably be the original Aladdin with Robin Williams. So before I shut this down, I do want to thank Jan. It was great to meet everybody on this trip. I had a lot of fun. I met a lot of people. I actually sold out of 2 of my books, which was really good. But the best part was meeting people that were hungry for information, watching the light bulbs go off as we started talking about rights and citizenship and freedom and liberty. It'd been so long because of COVID. It'd been so long since I'd had the opportunity to meet people face to face. It was worth it. I drove a lot, but I had a great time. I am looking to set up some more. I have someone trying to get me down to Tampa and the surrounding area, possibly in November. I just had someone contact me about going out to Houston, but we haven't sat down and talked the details yet. I've already got, I know somebody wants me to go up to northern Idaho. The weather's going to be getting kind of sour there soon, but I'm hoping maybe in the spring I'll do a tour through the Pacific Northwest. It's hard. I can't really spend more than 2 weeks on the road. Even 2 full weeks is hard for personal reasons. I have family commitments and whatnot, but I have such a great time. I meet so many people with so many great questions, and the ability to answer specific things like Jan brought up. Here's a father who's concerned for his child, and how do we help them? So I want to continue doing this tour. If you're interested, go to constitutionstudy.com/tour and put in a request. I'm still organizing them. We'll see what we can put forth. But the best thing any of you can do is help share the content. I described myself as a constitutional Johnny Appleseed, spreading seeds. Well, let's spread the seeds. If I can spread them to you, help you spread them around, maybe we don't have to live in a place like Fargo. Maybe we can turn Fargo into a place that actually respects people's rights. I've been using this recommendation. I'm hoping to start seeing small businesses putting up a sign that says, "We respect your rights. No mask, no vaccine, no problem." Let's see what we can do about making the idea of rights paramount, not just in our government, but make respect for rights paramount in our society again. And I think before we get government to respect our rights, we really need to get our society to respect our rights as well. And that's going to fall on us. And since we're the first ones to stand up and actually become part of the Constitution study and be willing to engage in Q&As, it's really up to us to spread the word. It's most Americans have no clue. Of the 330 million Americans, 329,999,990 probably don't know squat about the Constitution, or what they do know about the Constitution is wrong. But so it's a slow start, and it'll take time. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. Even if we don't get the ends we want in the time frame we want, the means matter, which means we matter, and it matters what we do. So take that out into the world, enjoy, share, and I'll see everyone, I think it'll be 2 more weeks before our next Q&A. Thanks. Good night, everyone.